I'm going to talk about a little summarised story. My previous audience and hosts have all heard about how I came across David, but for those who are new to my show tonight, what happened was about 10 years ago, after I had a very powerful Kundalini awakening, a friend of mine had sent me George Norrie, and it was David Icke, and I'm, just being regular housewife, vacuuming the house and everything like that, and George Norrie asks David, well, how long has this conspiracy been going on for, David? And David says, well, some people might be shocked to hear this, but this conspiracy has been going on for thousands of years. And at that moment, I dropped the vacuum cleaner and I turned it off, and I just sat down and listened for 2 hours. And I said to myself, who is this guy? And it ignited a passion of knowledge in me that has brought me to the place that I am here today. And so, David Icke, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. Woohoo!
Thanks, Nikki. It's my fault then.
Yes, it is.
I know. I've got a lot of people into a lot of trouble.
You sure have, but I tell you, it's worth every second of it, sweetheart, that's for sure. You've really ignited the world on fire with this amazing awakening that's happening at the moment. And I want to talk about the DNA and the junk DNA that everyone seems to be talking about today. And, do you think that it's got something to do with some more strands of our DNA awakening? Because for those of us who awakened and had these powerful awakenings, to what it seems to us is absolutely, insanely obvious, is totally oblivious to certain people who say an Australian politician who walks into one of your events and hears you talking about reptilians, and the politician says, what the F is this guy talking about, and walks straight into Parliament and starts talking about draconian law. What do you think, David?
Well, if you get the foundation wrong, then everything that comes from that is going to be flawed. Same with anything, building a building, anything. And it's the same with the concept of reality. If we perceive the body, for instance, to be something that is solid, as it appears to be and as we experience it, then we're going to see it and in terms of possibility in a certain way. And if you take the body to be solid, then those limitations on what is possible are going to be massive. And the very understanding of what DNA is all going to be measured and perceived as something physical. Well, what I'm saying, and I've said, all this time, and you've only got to look into the depths of, not even the depths, just the very basics of quantum physics to realize that there is no solidity. We experience solidity, but there is no solidity. It's basically reality is like a computer, the body, and Wi-Fi. And we are interacting with what I call cosmic Wi-Fi, which is the cosmic information field. And of course, when you look at the internet, you have a vast array of possibility, which you can take your computer to and which your computer can interact with. But we choose on the basis of what? Our perceptions, what part of the internet we're going to interact with. And what I'm saying is that the body is basically like a biological computer. Actually, it's an electromagnetic computer, which is interacting with this cosmic field of possibility and probability. And we are taking out of that field possibilities and probabilities, which we call experience, based on our perceptions, which are dictating not just in computer terms what part of the internet we choose to go to. Our perceptions are dictating, because every emotion, every thought, every state of perception is a frequency. And so our perceptions are dictating our frequency. And that frequency is dictating how we interact with the cosmic Wi-Fi, the cosmic field of possibility and probability. So if you have a perception that you are little me and have no power, then you will be operating on a very low band of frequency, a very low and limited band of frequency. Not because you're, inferior, but because your perception of little me, of limitation, is expressed as a frequency. And so you are interacting with the cosmic field of probability and possibility within that band of your perceived limitation. And so you'll live a limited life where nothing much really happens, and there's no excitement and no spontaneity. There's no incredible coincidences tend to turn up in your life. But when you take a completely different self-perception, in this case, like I am not my name, I'm not my labels, I'm not my sex, I'm not my race, I'm not my religion, they are all experiences that the true I is having, the true I being a state of awareness that can be the size of a pea, if we allow our perceptions to be imprisoned like that, or it can be a massively expanded state of awareness. And that is a completely different level of frequency. It's a different frequency in terms of its resonance, but it's also a much wider, a much greater span of frequency. And thus, you then are interacting only because your perceptions are different, not because you're a more special person. You're interacting with this cosmic field of possibility in a much more expanded and a much higher frequency way. So you are going to interact and pull out of that possibility and probability experiences that are very different to someone who is in I'm just little me, I'm just my labels mode. And someone like that is going to have tremendous synchronicity in their life. Coincidences are going to be happening all the time. You are going to have things drop in your lap just when you need them, not because you're more special, as I keep emphasizing, than little me, but because you are interacting with possibility and probability in a completely different way. Now, going back to the question, Nikki, about DNA and DNA resonance and DNA strands. DNA is a receiver transmitter of information. That's what it is. You look into research by scientists at the cutting edge of that, and they'll tell you the same. It's a receiver transmitter of information. Now, your perceptions. This is my view. Your perceptions are dictating that frequency, because if you are in little me mode, then the frequencies that your DNA is interacting with are going to reflect that perception, and therefore your DNA basically is going to be receiving and transmitting within a tiny fraction of its possibility, its potential, and thus it's like a muscle. It goes to sleep. There'll be great areas of DNA that won't really be used much because you're not needing them, because you're not interacting with reality on a scale that needs a much more expanded use of DNA. But then when your perceptions awaken and your self-identity changes, then that frequency expansion, that frequency that increase in frequency then starts to manifest, and the DNA starts to awaken to its greater potential, because it's now being activated because it's needed. And so this is how perceptions and DNA, perceptions and experience and life journey are all connected. And this is why also, just to finish the point, this is why the battle for the few or by the few to control the many is a battle for control of human perception. Because you control human perception, you're going to control human experience because of what I've just described. And this elite I've been exposing for 30 years knows that. And that's why control of perception is everything. And that's why control of information is everything, because we get our perceptions from information received.
Absolutely. Now, David, I want to talk to you about something that's pretty serious at the moment, because so many people are awakening at the moment. And from my experience, because a lot of my previous guests, a lot of my audience and everything like that are ET contactees and starseeds and people who are pretty up to date with what's going on. But a lot of us seem to be experiencing this V2K, which is like a voice to God kind of expression, where when you start to first wake up, just as an example, I was woken up about 5 o'clock in the morning, literally, and I received this communication to go out and take a picture of the moon. And on my little iPhone, and I got this picture, and I'm looking at this picture, and I zoomed in, and I could see all these like pink and purple towers and stuff like that. And what I thought was happening was that I was actually that was a ploy and a trick to gain my trust into thinking that I was actually having communication with my higher self or celestial beings, when in actual fact it was this transmission that was we've worked out later that it's coming from either our phones or the cell towers, or maybe the electromagnetic field that you talk about, where some of this information right now, like when I describe what I'm just about to say, it just brings shivers all down people's backs. But what we've discovered is that there's a group of Orion reptilians actually on Saturn, and when you turn Saturn side on, it actually looks like a 1930s microphone, and they're transmitting these frequencies, or this stuff that holds our DNA down, which is not working very well at the moment, and it gets relayed to the moon, and then the moon relays this frequency fence or something around our Earth in the electromagnetic field to hold the DNA down, which is not actually quite working at the moment. And this is what we're trying to work out, and we're trying to warn everybody out there at the moment, for people who are just wakening up, that it's not your actual higher self that you're talking to, that it is actually a transmission coming from somewhere. Have you heard about this V2K, David, voice to skull?
Well, it fits what what I've been saying. You see, I've been writing over the years in great detail about the connection of Saturn and the moon, etc., to human perception. Because I say we do actually live in some kind of matrix, some kind of virtual reality. Because it's real simple. What I've just described earlier, we think that the world is outside of us. It's not. The world is inside of us, as we perceive it. I'm sitting here now in my little office, and everything seems to be outside of me, but actually that's an illusion. What we perceive to be the physical world exists in our head when we decode it, just as the internet exists inside the computer when the computer decodes it. If you get a Wi-Fi field, where is it? You can't see it. It's an information field. But you get a computer and it decodes that information field into a form, a completely different form that we see on the screen, and we call the internet. And people say, yeah, the internet, it's what you see on the screen. And yeah, but it only exists like that on the screen, the internet. Everywhere else, it's electromagnetic field of information and electronic circuitry. And in the same way, we are taking waveform information from this field of possibility and probability, which I say is encoded with this matrix, this virtual reality. And we decode it from the waveform through the electrical, which is then from the five senses, which is then communicated to the brain. And the brain then decodes that electrical information into digital holographic information, which is like illusory physical information. But we interact with the world as if it's physical, because that's the way that we decode it. In the same way, you look at someone who is playing or experiencing one of these advanced video games when they have the gloves on and the headset on and the audio on, and what is happening? The information from the video game is hacking in to the very same decoding processes through which we decode what we call real world reality. So if we can be manipulated to decode information from, shall we say, a non-natural source, then we just like with a video game, if the frequency is right and the brain will decode it, because the brain is not who we are, it's just basically an information processor, then we are going to experience as a real reality this fake world that's being fed to us. And as I've written in the books over the years, so I can say at great length, Saturn and the Moon, I say, are very much involved in that process, because if you look at the brain, it operates within a certain band of frequency, and it is a processor of information. So if that information is being broadcast externally, shall we say, and it's on the frequency that the brain can decode, then the brain will decode it, just as it decodes anything else, just as it decodes your thoughts, which are what you think. And it creates an electromagnetic reaction in the brain, which then manifests as thought. This is why thoughts are frequencies. And if you can broadcast on that frequency, the brain will decode that as well. And that's how they can get inside your head. And what we're seeing now is more and more technology, a lot of it coming out of China, where they can do what they bloody like because of the nature of the government. We are seeing this stuff coming to light more and more, but it was in my books decades ago. This stuff's not new. Russia was doing this stuff a long time ago. Now China's at the cutting edge of this technology, etc., and America's in there, and Europe, and so people talk about seeing is believing. We can't even do that now, because you can so manipulate videos. You can get someone to appear very credibly to be saying something they've never said. So seeing's not believing now. We have to question that. But the point you're raising is hearing's not believing, and we have a mechanism, a filter called intuition, and that's the level of us that I say is connecting out beyond the manipulation, beyond the virtual reality game, if you like. Whereas the mind, the brain, is of this manipulation. It's of this program. And if we only go with our, if you like, intellect, then that's so easy to manipulate. Because what is intellect based on? It's based on thought. And if you can manipulate thought, you're manipulating the intellect on the basis of the intellect's perception of reality, and therefore from that comes behavior and what we'll do and won't do. But intuition's different. We don't feel it as a thought. We feel it as something in the center of the chest most of the time. Intuition says, I know. The brain says, I think. Intuition says, I know. And if we can, again, open up ourselves to this intuitive level of knowing rather than thinking, rather than working it out, knowing, and it's a feeling, it's a yes or it's a ooh no kind of feeling, then you can filter and walk your way and work your way through this maze that we really are in now, because as we speak, this whole global 5G catastrophe is being rolled out in America, first of all, of course, the great laboratory of the world, and then it's played out after it's been experimented on in America. It's played out across the world. And people think that, the American culture is everywhere. It's nothing to do with the American culture. It's to do with what's been tried on Americans and found to work in the way that desired. And then they play it out across the world. So it's starting in America, but it's coming in everywhere. I mean, I did a lot of talks around Europe last year. And everywhere I went, 5G was on the cusp of being rolled out. And the reason it's so important is the very subject that we're talking about, because I've been, writing for decades about the plan to create a technological sub-reality, whereby they create, put it simply, we live within the electromagnetic field of the Earth. We're interacting with it all the time. If you can change the nature of that technologically, and you can take it over, if you like, technologically, and you can fill it with information from technological sources, then that sea of energy information is going to change. And we're interacting with it all the time. And we're decoding it all the time. And therefore, if you can control that, you can control what people think, how people feel, etc. And what they've been doing now is step by step creating, and they're on the cusp of where they've always wanted to go, a what they call a smart grid. That's why everything's called smart now, where all this technology communicates with all the other technology and creates a grid. And 5G, of course, because it doesn't travel far, requires little boxes down every street on the lampposts and bus stops, pumping this stuff out. And the idea is that this technological sub-reality is all-encompassing, that you won't be able to go anywhere on Earth without being in the field that it's generating. And 5G frequency, millimeter frequency, and power is necessary to make this grid work. That's why they're rolling it out, knowing its consequences in terms of health and psychological damage, without any independent testing at all. That's why scientists have come out and said this is an experiment on humanity, but it's not, because those in the shadows that are making this rollout happen know exactly what it's going to do. It's nothing to do with an experiment. They know what it's going to do, and they're putting it out because they want it to do that. The other part of this is what they're sending up into low and high orbit, and that is 20,000 satellites pumping 5G. That's what the plan is, back at the Earth. And ironically, a guy who's been given the go-ahead in America by the American government to put up over 4,000 of these satellites is Elon Musk with his SpaceX. Now, here's Elon Musk saying on one level that artificial intelligence could be the end of humanity. And at the same time, he's putting these satellites up in orbit with his rockets from his SpaceX operation, and he's putting his own up as well. And he's also started a company to connect the human brain to artificial intelligence. So just explain to me, Elon, if you could, I doubt you could, but have a go, why you're saying that it could be the end of humanity and then playing a major part in bringing it about. And this whole end game is designed to connect the human brain to artificial intelligence. And it needs this 5G grid to do it, because it's all about perception. Control of perception means control of everything. So up to this point, perception has been manipulated by controlling information that people receive. It's what all the censorship's about now on the internet and Google and Facebook and Twitter. It's because to get the internet to become the very foundation of human society, which was the plan, they had to offer an internet that people wanted. The point is that while this sounds so powerful, this imposition on the population, it's actually incredibly tenuous, because it depends completely for its existence on human perception, particularly human self-identity, staying in its present state. And see, and this is not just some trite mantra that people say about, there's a wake up going on. There's a wake up going on. I'm seeing it all over the world. And as the people awaken to see things they couldn't see before, so the system is trying to shut down perception technologically to stop that awakening happening. But see, technology is only powerful over those which are in perceptually limited states. Not to say they're stupid, but they are in a perceptual self-identity state that perceives their own limitation, and they perceive their own self-identity by the labels that they're given. And the labels are very important, because once people self-identify with labels, they're self-identifying with limitation, because the labels represent the five senses. That's what the labels are. And there are labels for five sense happenings, five sense things. And so if you self-identify with labels, you're self-identifying with the five sense level of self, which is incredibly limited. It's just the frequency level where we interact with this reality. It's not who we are. And so they want us to keep self-identifying with labels, so that we don't awaken to the true self, which is actually, I am the consciousness, the awareness, having the experience that is called those labels. They're not me, they are experiences. My name is a name for my experience. My racial type is simply the type of vehicle that my awareness is having to experience this reality. Someone else will have a different one. This is why racism and all this stuff is so utterly insane. It's like, having a fight over, different spacesuits and who's got the best one and where it was made and what color it is. It's ludicrous. It's all ludicrous. But the more that we can be manipulated to identify with labels, the more we self-identify with the five senses, the more we self-identify with limitation, which is why, one reason why, there are others, and I'm going to go into all this in these talks in Australia, where I'm going to connect so many dots in March. But this is why, if you notice, labels are being subdivided and subdivided and subdivided into smaller and smaller and smaller labels. Now, this is the reason that this list of letters, LGBT, I think it was at one time, well, you want to see some of them now. It's like an alphabet. Wow. Describing self-identity. And what it's doing is it's describing self-identity in smaller and smaller minutiae of detail. I am are, this, that, or the other. And it's creating two things. First of all, it's creating an even more myopic perception of self and self-identity. It's not I am are this or I am are that anymore. It's I am are this aspect of that, or that aspect of that, or this fusion of that. They're just getting smaller and smaller. And the other benefit from the manipulation point of view is the more labels you create, the more potential you have to play the labels off against each other to divide and rule. So the target population is so focused on fighting among itself that it doesn't actually see the strings attached to everybody are held by the same hand. And so now you reach the point where feminists are having punch-ups in the street with transgender people because the labels are becoming legion. And it's crazy. It's an experience. Just if people see it as an experience and not who they are, then you start to realize, well, hold on a minute. You might call yourself this, you might call yourself that, but we're all points of attention within the same expression of awareness, of consciousness. I am you, you are me. We're just having different experiences at this point. And everyone has the opportunity then to chill out. And if they want to self-identify with being a label, fair enough. But they don't feel that they need to impose their label on everyone else. And have everyone else run around catering for their label, which is what's happening. And that is all part of the getting the population to control and impose itself upon itself, getting, with political correctness, for instance, the population to silence itself, which is what that's all about. And the labels are key. We've got to ditch the labels as a self-identity. Just, have a nice experience. Call it what you like, but it's not who you are. And then what starts to happen, as I mentioned right at the start, is as your perceptions start to expand in terms of your self-identity, instead of contract into smaller and smaller perceptual labels, then your DNA starts to get activated in terms of its wider potential for interaction with possibility and probability. And something else happens. It starts to resonate to a higher frequency. This control grid operates within a particular range of frequency. And the idea is to manipulate the population perceptually, and in terms of its emotional state. The more oppression, yes, but the more depression, the more anxiety, the more fear. All these are low vibrational states, emotional states. And when you fall into them, your energetic field and the DNA receiver transmissions fall into these low frequency states. And what they're doing is they're pulling you into their frequency layer on which this technological system works. So when you go through this awakening, truly go through it, not just intellectually, but you become it, then you start to withdraw from a frequency connection with this stuff, with this manipulational reality, this fake reality. And you start to, see through it. The world starts to become an open book, and you can see what's going on so clearly when you couldn't before, because you were in the world and of the world. Now you're looking from another level of frequency at this world, and you're going, whoa, so that's what's happening. And the other side of it is it stops impacting upon you. It stops influencing you because it can't make a frequency connection with you anymore. And by your DNA receiver transmissions are going into a higher frequency, you are then able to connect with levels of frequency, i.e. levels of awareness, levels of information, levels of insight that are beyond this control grid. And thus you can see things that other people can't see, not because you're better than they are, but you're accessing something they're not. So, through the last 30 years, I've written and talked in great detail about names, dates, places, manipulation, and all this stuff. But I've never talked about it without talking at the same time about the nature of reality and the nature of self, because without the two, there's something missing. I hear lots of people talking about reality and the nature of human spirit, human awareness, who not only won't talk about the conspiracy, they actively condemn anyone that does. But they need to ask themselves, you say that we are consciousness. Yeah, okay, right. and you say that we're really beings of spirit. Yeah, okay, right. So why does the vast majority of people not think that? Why do people have, the vast majority of people, still though it's changing, have a very different perception of who they are? Why do they think they're their labels? Why do they think they're their name, their job, their income bracket, their race, their religion? Why do they do that? Because they're being manipulated and programmed into that perception from cradle to grave. That's why. So while we talk about reality and consciousness and the nature of the I, we also have to, if we care about making a difference here, address the manipulation going on around us to stop us from accessing that true awareness of who we are, and thus live that potential and not this limited potential of label self-identity. And at the same time, those, and there are many of them, who research into the names, dates, places, etc. manipulation, who won't go into this level of spirit, reality, nature of the I, and all they can do is see the problem, but there is no solution, because the solution is a transformation of human self-identity, thus a transformation of human frequency, thus a transformation of human experience.
You know what? I went through an identity crisis when I first woke up too, and when I broke out through all that programming, and realized that I didn't need that anymore. And I think that's probably what people are probably afraid to actually break out of those labels, because they're hanging on to them so tightly, because they don't realize that there is so much more out there, so much more expansion out there. And once you start to actually break from this programming, it's amazing how knowledge and information comes to you to help you more and more and more awaken up to what is really going on on this planet. And I just think people are just terrified of, and they're hanging on to these identities for so long because we don't know anything else. But there is something else out there. There's so much more out there. This knowledge that you introduced me to, David, and I sprung boarded out into everything, and it just blossomed into a great big flower. It seems to be endless. There is just not enough for me now. I'm always, finding more information new and growing and growing and have, grown with you when you first started. And I remember you said you were, you've come a long way since you've been in the back of a van driving up and down Queensland all those years ago.
Yes.
How do you feel like when you look back at that? Because David, not only myself from here, I'm speaking from myself here, but everybody else is growing with you, because we've seen your videos and read your books, and also bought them for everybody else, and tried to wake everybody else, red pilled everyone, just buzzing and stuff like that. How do you feel? And now that you've come so far, and this awakening is just massive at the moment. I mean, hindsight is a fantastic tool, isn't it? How do you feel right now with what's happening around the world? Is there, is there like highlights there, or is there a pinnacle time where you just go, oh my God, this is really happening now? And what's the rest of the world, going through right now? Is it really full on at the moment?
Well, all over the world, wherever I go, people are opening their minds to at least question what they've not questioned before. I've never seen anything like it on the scale. And not only that, the kind of people, what you might call system people, you never thought would change and look at life from a different angle, but they are. So, and one of the things that's happening, of course, is increasingly. See, when I started out, the things I was saying were planned by this conspiracy, this web, this global web. They seemed far out and crazy, and they weren't happening then, but now they are happening. They're being delivered on the television news night after night. And so that has also brought people, because it's now in their face, and they're saying, well, hold on a minute, this is happening. So that's been a very powerful thing. But I don't know if you know, but I went to see a psychic in 1990, in March 1990. Oh, it's coming up to the 19th anniversary, not 19th anniversary, 29th anniversary of it. Whatever it is, I'm not great at maths. But the thing that happened is I was having some very strange things happen to me, very paranormal things. And I went to see this psychic simply because I wanted to know if she would pick up what was going on around me. It'd been going on for about a year. And I was working for the BBC at the time. And long story short, she goes into psychic mode on the third visit. And she starts saying that I'm going to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets. And that I would face enormous opposition, but, quote, they would always be there to protect me. And one of the things that came out in that early period was that there was a vibrational change coming that was going to act like a spiritual alarm clock. It was going to wake people up from their slumber. Basically, it was going to start to resonate their frequency and release it from its coma state. And another thing it said was that this frequency change would have the effect of bringing to the surface all that had been hidden from us. What we hadn't seen before would be brought to the surface, and we could see what had been going on. Now, of course, in 1990, when I was told this, there was no evidence of any of it. But I mean, look at it now, and look at what we know now. We didn't know 30 years ago. Look at what we know now. We didn't know 5 years ago in terms of what's been happening in the hidden. And so what I'm seeing with this awakening is actually a 30-year later confirmation of what I was told in 1990, that this was going to happen. And so I'm very optimistic. But what we're involved in is almost, for want of a word, a race, because what is happening, this awakening is starting to impact itself on more people. And this manipulation is trying to get humans connected to artificial intelligence as fast as it possibly can, so that it will head off this transformation of human awareness by artificially suppressing it through artificial intelligence. And this is why people like Ray Kurzweil, this crazy man, who's an executive of Google and a quote futurist, is predicting that the human brain will start to be connected to artificial intelligence by 2030. And what they've done, of course, and this is the why they're targeting the young so mercilessly, is, when you're born into a world, you tend to think that this is how things are. That this is what human life is. Mm-hmm. And when I was born in the 1950s, the world was a certain way. There was certainly no technology that we have today, nothing even close. There was hardly any technology at all, not for young people anyway. And so you have a filter, you have a radar. So when the world changes as you move through your life, you are aware of those changes because the world is no longer like it was the one that you knew. What's happening now with young people is they're born into this stuff. So this technological world and this world of surveillance and control and loss of privacy is how things are. This is why I have so much respect for young people who I think are the most perceptually targeted generations now in probably human history, certainly known human history, and how so many of them have seen through it despite everything. But this is what's happening. And so, first of all, they put out this technology to get people, particularly the young, but everybody really, but particularly the young, addicted to smart technology, the phones, the tablets. They've moved on to getting on the body with all these gadgets and smart watches and Bluetooth and all these things that people put on their bodies now, which connect them to the internet. And the next stage, and it's happening already, is to get in the body with forms of microchipping and connect people to external technology that way, and that's where it's all been leading. So it's been and when you get people addicted to something, they want the next fix. So you might start on a weaker drug, and then you get a bit bored with that, so you go on to a harder drug and a harder drug, and what's happening is people are being led down this road from smartphones to and tablets to stuff on the body to stuff in the body to connections to artificial intelligence with the body, and this is what's happening. And it's a challenge to get the information out there about the nature of this, because that which controls the mainstream media doesn't want it out there. That's why there's no real debate in the mainstream media about 5G. And this is the thing to remember.
Yeah.
Anything where you are not allowed an alternative opinion is the agenda. Anything where the debate is shut down and open debate is not allowed, it's the agenda. And you look around the world at different subjects, anything you can't talk about, anything that if you have a different opinion, you are abused as being a bigot or being this or being that. That's the agenda. Because if you can't win a debate, and on these subjects they can't, if we had an open debate, then shut it down. If you can't win the debate, make sure there isn't one. That's how it works.
You know what, David? Like when I speak to my daughter, she says to me, like, Mum, when you were growing up, your world was intact, but I'm growing up in a world that's actually falling apart, and that's why so many kids are so addicted to this smart, which is actually inverted dumb technology. When you look at our phones, it's it's a smartphone, but it's got a dumb battery. But I was very, very lucky to come across you, about 10 years ago. So my daughter was about 12 at that time. And so I showed her some of your videos, and she said, Mum, like back then I didn't quite get it. But now, like, she stayed up, I think when she was about 19, she came over and stayed over at my place, and she stayed up till about 3 o'clock in the morning watching, all your DVDs in one big binge. And she said, Mum, I didn't get it when I was a bit younger, but now I get it now. And and despite the fact that all the young population is being targeted right now, there really are a lot of kids that are waking up to and they don't go into, they're very aware of what's happening, and so they have a choice now of not to be sucked in or interact with this smart technology coming in.
One aspect of shutting down opinions and information that the system doesn't want circulating is to absolutely intimidate people into silence. And out of this building, of course, has come the infamous Twitter storm. That's when you post something that's outside of the official narrative, and whoa, you get endless abuse. I have a methodology of dealing with Twitter storms, and it goes like that, okay? If you don't agree with what I say, please be my guest, because that's your human right, that's your freedom. But if you think that you can have an opinion and I can't, well, see that, because I don't give a shit. You have a right to freedom, great. And you want that, don't you? Oh yeah, I have freedom, I just say what I like. Well, I have that right too, and so does everyone else. And if you don't like that, well, have some of that.